The radio transmission crackles across the Atlantic. Berlin holds its breath. In a nondescript safe house somewhere in suburban London, a place whose true location remains classified even today, the fingers of a Spanish-born man move across typewriter keys with deliberate precision. The keys strike, the words form. Each letter is a carefully constructed lie, each sentence a masterpiece of controlled deception that will alter the course of history in the next 48 hours. His code name is Garbo. To the Germans, he is known as Arabelle. His network, supposedly comprising 27 dedicated agents spread across the British Isles, has just received urgent orders to stand by for critical intelligence. The Germans believe they are about to receive information that will confirm their strategic assumptions about where the main Allied invasion will strike. What they don't know is that every single agent in his network exists only in imagination. Every report, every source, every piece of intelligence has been fabricated by a man whose real name is Juan Pujol García, a chicken farmer from Barcelona who never attended spy academy, never fired a rifle in combat, and whose only weapon has been his extraordinary capacity for deception. In exactly 24 hours, his next message will arrive. It will be the most important signal he has ever sent. It will help determine the fate of millions. But to understand how a mild-mannered Catalan agricultural enthusiast became the most decorated double agent in the history of modern warfare, the only spy to receive military honors from both the Allies and Nazi Germany, we must first travel backward to a Barcelona morning in 1912, to the moment this extraordinary life began. Barcelona, the formative years, 1912-1936. The boy who dreamed, February 14th, 1912. Barcelona, Catalonia. A child is born into a world of industrial revolution and political ferment. His name is Juan Pujol García. His father is a man of commerce, a businessman operating within the economic machinery of turn-of-the-century Spain. The boy grows up in an environment of relative prosperity, surrounded by the intellectual currents of Catalan culture, language, tradition, independence of thought. Young Juan is not an exceptional student in the conventional sense. He does not distinguish himself through athletic prowess or academic brilliance in the traditional manner. Instead, he possesses something far more unusual, a mind that lives partially in imagination, that constructs elaborate narratives, that sees the world not as it is, but as it could be. His teachers notice this quality. Some view it as a deficiency, others recognize it as something rare, the unbounded creativity of a mind not yet constrained by conventional reality. He attends the Royal Poultry School of Arenys de Mar, a technical institution focused on agricultural science and animal husbandry. It is an unusual choice for a boy from his social class, but it reveals something important about his character. Juan Pujol García, even at a young age, chooses paths that others do not follow. He is drawn to practical application, to the tangible world of breeding, raising, and managing livestock. Yet even in these technical studies, his mind wanders to larger patterns, to systems, to how information flows through hierarchies. By the mid-1920s, he has developed into a serious young man, reserved, thoughtful, and increasingly disturbed by the political turbulence beginning to consume Spain. He witnesses the competing ideologies of the age, left-wing republicanism gaining strength among the working classes, right-wing nationalism rising as a counterforce, the church defending its ancient privileges, regional movements demanding autonomy for Catalonia. Spain, during this decade, is a nation in ideological ferment, and Barcelona is the crucible where these conflicts rage most intensely. Juan Pujol García cannot help but absorb these currents. He sees fascism rising in Italy and Germany, brutal, systematic, totalitarian. He sees communism gaining adherents among Spanish workers and intellectuals. He detests both with equal passion. To young Juan, both systems represent an assault on human dignity and individual liberty. Both seek to subordinate the individual to the state, whether that state claims to represent workers or racial purity. This moral clarity, this instinctive rejection of extremism, will become the animating principle of his entire existence. Unlike many who drift through history passively, Juan Pujol García develops in his 20s a firm conviction that he must do something. But what and how? For now, he remains largely unknown, a quiet young man managing agricultural pursuits, reading voraciously about politics and current events, and beginning to form the outlines of a life philosophy that will eventually propel him into the shadows of world history. The Spanish Civil War and the Awakening, 1936-1939, The Crucible of Spain, July 18, 1936. Franco's military forces rise in rebellion against the Spanish Republic. Within weeks, Spain descends into civil war, one of the bloodiest, most ideologically charged conflicts of the 20th century. By this time, Juan Pujol García has developed his own modest agricultural enterprise. He is a young man in his mid-20s, politically conscious, deeply opposed to extremism in all its forms. The Spanish Civil War places him in an impossible position. The Republican government represents democracy and constitutional order, but it is increasingly dominated by left-wing elements, communists and anarchists, whom Pujol views with profound suspicion. Franco's nationalist forces represent military discipline and national unity, but they are fascist in their ideology and absolutely ruthless in their methods. What does a man of principle do when forced to choose between two forms of tyranny? Pujol's response is characterized by his lifelong pattern of indirect action. He does not join either side. He does not take up arms. Instead, he uses his knowledge of rural Spain, his connections, and his wits to navigate the chaos. He moves between zones controlled by different forces. He learns to speak the language of both Republicans and nationalists. He observes how each side operates, how information flows, how suspicion and denunciation function as instruments of control. The Spanish Civil War becomes his first education in the workings of power, deception, and survival. He watches as ordinary citizens are swept into violence. He sees how propaganda works, how words can be weaponized. He observes military operations from a distance. Most importantly, he begins to understand something that will become the foundation of his life's work. Information is power. The right information, placed strategically, can influence decisions. False information, if it is believed, can be more powerful than truth. The war ends in 1939 with Franco's complete victory. Republican Spain is crushed. The Spanish Republic falls. Franco's fascist state is established, and Catalonia, with its distinct language and culture, is suppressed under centralist Spanish rule. Juan Pujol García emerges from this period of chaos with his ideals intact, but increasingly radicalized by what he has witnessed. He has seen fascism, communism, and nationalist militarism in their most brutal manifestations. He has watched neighbors betray neighbors. He has observed the machinery of repression, and he has become convinced that he must do something concrete to oppose tyranny. But he is also pragmatic. He is not a revolutionary, not a communist, not a fascist. He is something far more dangerous to totalitarian systems, a thinking man with a clear moral compass and a willingness to act. The British offer and the shocking rejection, 1939-1941. Seeking to serve the year is 1939. Europe is transformed. Hitler's Nazi Germany has invaded Poland. Britain and France have declared war on Germany. The world is fragmenting into ideological and military camps. Spain, nominally neutral but emotionally aligned with Nazi Germany through their shared fascist ideology, and Franco's Spanish Civil War assistance, watches from the sidelines. Madrid is a city of intrigue, a place where intelligence agencies of multiple nations operate, often openly, always carefully. Juan Pujol García is now in his late 20s. He has a wife. He has agricultural interests. He has the comfort of relative safety in neutral Spain, but he cannot accept neutrality. He has convinced himself, through careful moral reasoning, that he has a duty to oppose Nazi tyranny. The Germans represent, in his view, the most complete and systematic manifestation of the totalitarian impulse he has come to despise. So he makes a decision that is, on its surface, completely unreasonable. He approaches the British embassy in Madrid. He makes contact with British diplomatic staff. He presents himself not as a refugee, not as a businessman, but as a potential agent, a man willing to work for British intelligence against Nazi Germany. Think about what this takes. Pujol is a Spanish citizen in a Spanish city. Franco's government, while officially neutral, is thoroughly infiltrated by German agents. German intelligence maintains a significant presence in Madrid. If Pujol's approach to the British becomes known, he faces arrest, interrogation, torture, and likely execution. Yet he does it anyway. This is the measure of his conviction. This is the clarity of his moral compass. But something extraordinary happens. The British reject him. The British diplomats listen politely. They thank him for his offer. They recognize his sincerity and his anti-Nazi credentials. But they explain that they have no use for him. They are not recruiting Spanish nationals at this particular moment. They have adequate intelligence coverage in Spain. They suggest he leave while he is still safe, forget this conversation, and continue his life. It is a crushing rejection. But it is also the decisive moment in Juan Pujol García's life, the moment where his extraordinary quality of mind, his fundamental refusal to accept rejection, his deep conviction that he must act, combines to produce something unprecedented. Most men, rejected by the British, would accept the decision. They would assume that the professionals know best. They would return to their agricultural pursuits and their families. Juan Pujol García does not accept this. Instead, he concludes, if the British will not use him, he will force them to. His plan is audacious. It is dangerous. It is in many ways completely irrational. He will offer himself to the Nazis. Infiltrating the enemy, 1941-1942. Becoming a Nazi agent. The logic behind Pujol's decision is strange, but ultimately persuasive. He reasons as follows. If he becomes a German agent, if he establishes himself as trusted and valuable within German intelligence networks, then he can approach the British from a position of strength. He will not be a mere civilian offering his services. He will be a functioning intelligence operative, proven and positioned within the German system. The British, recognizing his value, will have to accept him. It is a plan that could work only for someone with an almost superhuman level of nerves and conviction. Pujol manufactures a false identity. He presents himself to the German intelligence service, the Abwehr, as Juan Gómez, a fanatically pro-Nazi Spanish government official with close connections to Franco's regime. He claims to be ideologically committed to Nazi Germany and to the Axis cause. He expresses his desire to serve the German war effort by gathering intelligence. The Abwehr, which is always seeking additional agents and always hungry for fresh intelligence streams, accepts him. They provide him with instructions. They give him assignments. They issue him with money. They provide him with secret writing techniques, special inks and methods for concealing messages in ordinary correspondence. They give him a code name, Arabelle. And then they give him the most crucial assignment of all. They instruct him to travel to Britain and establish an intelligence network inside the British Isles. This is an extraordinary opportunity and an extraordinary danger. If Pujol actually travels to Britain and is discovered, he will be executed as a German spy. If he refuses the assignment, the Germans will grow suspicious. If he accepts and fails to produce results, he will be discovered and eliminated. Instead of traveling to Britain, which would be suicidal, Pujol relocates to Lisbon, Portugal. Lisbon in 1941 is a nest of espionage activity. German agents, British agents, Italian agents, Spanish agents, Portuguese agents, and intelligence services from nations both large and small maintain active operations in the Portuguese capital. It is a place of carefully calibrated betrayals and fluid allegiances. Lisbon is also a place where information is freely available. It is a city of newspapers, cinema newsreels, magazines, travel guides, tourist literature, and casual conversation. It is a city where anyone with curiosity, patience, and time can construct elaborate narratives about what is happening in Britain and what the British are planning. Pujol takes this ordinary information, newspapers, train schedules, cinema newsreels, magazine advertisements, travel guides to Britain, and transforms it into something extraordinary. He begins to compose reports that he claims come from an agent inside Britain. These reports describe military installations, troop movements, supply lines, and strategic assessments. The information is detailed enough to seem authentic. It is also vague enough that it cannot easily be disproven. The Abwehr, always overextended, always desperate for intelligence, and always inclined toward the confirmation bias that leads intelligence agencies to believe information that fits their preconceived notions, begins to accept his reports as genuine. Pujol's genius at this moment is to establish himself as reliable before introducing deception. His early reports contain enough accurate or seemingly plausible information that German handlers begin to believe him. They forward his intelligence up the chain of command. Abwehr officers in Berlin receive reports attributed to this agent inside Britain and incorporate them into their strategic assessments. But Pujol understands something crucial. A single source with perfect accuracy would be suspicious. Humans are fallible. Intelligence gathering is imperfect. Networks have weaknesses. So Pujol invents the next layer of his deception. He claims that he cannot do all this intelligence gathering himself. He needs help. He needs a network of sub-agents, people inside Britain who can provide him with information that he then consolidates and transmits to his German handlers. Thus is born the fictional network that will eventually grow to 27 imaginary agents. Each agent has a history, a personality, a motivation, a style of writing, an area of expertise. There is the Venezuelan businessman in Glasgow with unusual access to military information. There is the indiscreet American Army sergeant garrisoned in England who carelessly discusses military matters in public. There is the Welsh nationalist in Swansea who leads a fascist organization called the Brothers of the Aryan World Order, a group that exists only in Pujol's imagination but that seems entirely plausible to German intelligence officers. Pujol's genius is to create variety and redundancy in his fictional network. If one agent's information proves questionable, there are 26 others. If one source seems to have a particular bias, this can be balanced by information from sources with different perspectives. If one agent temporarily disappears or goes quiet, this can be explained through entirely believable pretexts: illness, travel, temporary unavailability. By late 1941, Pujol's fictional network is becoming increasingly sophisticated and productive. The Abwehr is forwarding his intelligence to Berlin with increasing frequency. The Third Reich's military leadership is incorporating assessments based on Pujol's fabricated information into their strategic thinking. Pujol has succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. He is now trusted by Nazi Germany, but his ultimate goal remains unfulfilled. He is still not working for the British. Section 5. The Turning Point. London finally takes notice. April 1942. The convoy that changed everything. By early 1942, Pujol has developed a track record in the eyes of German intelligence. His reports have been numerous, detailed and seemingly well-sourced, but he has also, whether by design or accident, included enough misinformation that discrepancies are beginning to emerge. At some point in early 1942, Pujol includes in one of his reports information about a specific military convoy allegedly being assembled in Britain for transport across the Atlantic. He provides details, supposedly from one of his invented subagents, about ships, tonnage, supplies, timing and destination. The convoy, as far as Pujol knows or cares, doesn't actually exist. It is a fabrication, one among many. He invents details with his characteristic thoroughness and internal consistency. The Abwehr, however, treats this information as urgent and highly credible. They have come to trust Pujol. They view him as among their most valuable sources inside Britain, so they treat this convoy report as genuine intelligence of strategic importance. The Germans invest considerable resources in attempting to locate and interdict this fictional convoy. German Navy vessels are dispatched. German submarines are positioned. German command structure is altered to respond to this perceived threat. The convoy, of course, is never found. It doesn't exist. But something extraordinary happens in the aftermath of this failed search. British intelligence, monitoring German communications that have been broken by the code-breaking operation at Bletchley Park, observe the Germans' frantic efforts to find and destroy a convoy that doesn't exist. They intercept German radio transmissions indicating that a German intelligence asset has provided this information. British intelligence concludes one of two things. Either the Germans have a highly valuable source inside Britain who is providing them with strategic intelligence, or someone is deliberately feeding the Germans false information to waste their resources. Both possibilities are remarkable. Both possibilities are worthy of investigation. British intelligence begins a methodical investigation. They work backward from the German communications. They analyze the intelligence that the Germans claim to be receiving. They attempt to identify the source. Through patient detective work, examining the patterns of information, the communication methods, the areas of knowledge demonstrated, they eventually identify that the source appears to be operating out of Lisbon and that the source is claiming to run an agent network inside Britain. British intelligence officers examine this more carefully. They recognize several extraordinary facts. First, this agent network appears to exist largely in the imagination of the primary source. Second, despite the fundamental unreality of this network, the primary source has established extraordinary credibility with the Abwehr. Third, an agent capable of convincing Nazi Germany that a fictional convoy exists and thereby misdirecting German military resources might be extraordinarily valuable to British intelligence. Fourth, the motivations of this agent appear to be genuinely anti-Nazi rather than mercenary or opportunistic. In the early months of 1942, British intelligence makes contact with Juan Pujol García. The conversation, we can imagine, is extraordinary. British intelligence officers approach Pujol with knowledge of his activities, his contact with the Germans, his fictional network, his fabricated intelligence. For Pujol, this moment contains existential terror. He has violated Spanish neutrality. He has committed treason against Franco's Spain. He has engaged in espionage against Germany. He has operated independently without authorization from any government. If the British choose to arrest him, he faces imprisonment, torture, and likely execution. But they don't arrest him. Instead, they make him an offer. Come to Britain, work for us, become a double agent. Use your established credibility with the Germans to feed the misinformation on behalf of Britain. For Pujol, this is the moment he has been working towards since he approached the British embassy in Madrid and was rejected. His gamble has paid off. His moral conviction has been vindicated. He is finally going to have the opportunity to act against Nazi Germany, but now with the full backing and resources of British intelligence. Arrival in London. The double agent is born, May 1942, the move to London. In April and May of 1942, Juan Pujol García and his family are brought to Britain. The move is accomplished with careful security. His wife and child are brought into the country discreetly under what we can assume were assumed identities or cover stories. The family is relocated to a safe house somewhere in the London suburbs. Pujol himself undergoes extensive debriefing by British intelligence. Officers from MI5, the British security service responsible for counterintelligence and the management of double agents, conduct detailed interviews. They want to understand every aspect of his network, every technique he has used, every fiction he has constructed, every contact he has maintained with German intelligence. Pujol proves to be extraordinarily cooperative. He has not betrayed his trust in British intelligence. Instead, he provides complete transparency about his operations, his methods, and his relationship with the Abwehr. During these debriefings, a crucial decision is made. Pujol will be given a new codename. The British, recognizing his extraordinary flair for theatrical, elaborate deception, nickname him Garbo, after the Swedish actress Greta Garbo, who was famous for her extraordinary ability to persuade audiences to believe in elaborate fictions. Pujol is assigned a handler, an officer from MI5 who will direct his operations, manage his communications with the Germans, and ensure that the intelligence he provides to the enemy serves British strategic objectives. This handler is Tommy Harris, a Spanish-speaking MI5 officer of Spanish descent who will work with Pujol for the remainder of the war. The MI5 official history would later describe the Harris-Pujol relationship as one of those rare partnerships between two exceptionally gifted men whose inventive genius inspired and complemented each other. This is an understatement. What emerges from the Harris-Pujol partnership is nothing less than a revolution in the art of double-agent operations. Pujol and Harris must accomplish several critical objectives. First, they must maintain Pujol's credibility with the Abwehr. The Germans must continue to believe that Pujol is a loyal, productive, highly valuable agent working within Britain. Second, they must transition Pujol's communication method from the clumsy system of letters with secret writing to a more sophisticated radio system that will allow for rapid, encrypted communication with German handlers. Third, they must feed the Germans misinformation that serves British strategic objectives, information that will misdirect German resources, waste German military effort, and provide the Allies with strategic advantage. Fourth, and most ambitiously, they must dramatically expand the fictional network of subagents. What has previously been a relatively modest operation, encompassing perhaps 3 to 5 imaginary agents, must be expanded to include 20 to 30 fictional operatives, each with detailed life histories, motivations, communication patterns, and areas of expertise. This expansion is critical. With more agents providing information, the volume of reported intelligence increases exponentially. The Germans become increasingly dependent on Pujol's network as a source. They begin to invest more and more resources in receiving, analyzing, and acting on information from Pujol's network. And Pujol and Harris gain correspondingly more control over German perceptions of reality. Over the next 2 years, from the summer of 1942 through the spring of 1944, Harris and Pujol construct something unprecedented in the history of espionage, an entirely fictional intelligence network that generates hundreds and hundreds of pages of detailed, seemingly authoritative, internally consistent misinformation that will eventually influence the highest levels of Nazi Germany's military command, including Adolf Hitler himself. The letters and the elaborate deception, 1942-1944. Words as weapons. The primary communication mechanism between Pujol and the Abwehr is initially neither telephone nor radio, but something far more elegant and subtle. Letters written in ordinary handwriting, appearing to be innocent personal correspondence, concealing layers of secret writing beneath the visible text. These are not simple letters. They are masterpieces of deceptive writing. Pujol maintains the precise persona of a verbose, fanatically pro-Nazi Spanish loyalist, consumed with ideological fervor, devoted to the German cause, and deeply anxious to prove his worth to his German masters. The style is predetermined. Pujol and Harris decide on a specific writing persona and voice, and Pujol adheres to it with absolute consistency across all communications. This consistency is crucial. If the Germans are eventually able to examine multiple letters, they will perceive a single unified voice, not multiple voices that might suggest fabrication. The persona Pujol constructs is simultaneously charming and irritating, helpful and verbose, enthusiastic and occasionally complaining. Between May 1942 and mid-1944, Harris and Pujol compose and send approximately 315 letters containing secret writing. On average, each letter conceals approximately 2,000 words of secret written intelligence, information supposedly gathered by Pujol's network of sub-agents, analyzed by Pujol, and transmitted to German handlers. This means that over approximately 2 years, Harris and Pujol collectively produce and transmit roughly 630,000 words of detailed misinformation to Nazi Germany. To put this in perspective, this is equivalent to approximately 5 to 6 novels of information, all of it carefully crafted to seem authentic, internally consistent, logically coherent, and strategically valuable. The communications method is ingenious. The letters are addressed to a specific post office box in Lisbon, provided by the Germans. The physical letters are carried to Lisbon by a courier, in reality, a British intelligence operative masquerading as a civilian. The letter is then collected by the Germans and transmitted to German intelligence headquarters in Madrid, and from there to Berlin. The process is slow. Sometimes weeks pass between composition and receipt, but the slowness is actually an advantage. It prevents rapid real-time interaction that might expose inconsistencies. It allows time for corrections and adjustments. It permits the Germans to test Pujol's information against reality, and by the time they detect inconsistencies, new information has already arrived that refocuses their attention. Within these letters, Pujol and Harris create an elaborate fictional universe. They invent agents with detailed personalities and backgrounds. There is the Venezuelan businessman in Glasgow, a man with access to shipping information due to commercial connections, who is sympathetic to the German cause and has agreed to help the war effort by providing intelligence. There is the indiscreet American Army sergeant in England, a man of questionable political reliability who has become friendly with one of Pujol's agents and who carelessly discusses military matters during social occasions. There is the Welsh nationalist in Swansea, a man opposed to what he views as English imperialism, sympathetic to German culture, and leading a small fascist organization called the Brothers of the Aryan World Order. Nundu. This agent has supposedly recruited several others among the Welsh fascist movement who can provide additional intelligence. There are others, industrial workers with access to manufacturing data, shipping clerks with knowledge of supply movements, military officers with sympathetic politics, communication specialists with information about telephonic networks, agricultural workers with knowledge of supply movements through rural areas. Each agent has a history that explains his access to information. Each has a motivation that explains his willingness to betray Britain. Each has a communication style that reflects his personality and education. Each reports information in formats consistent with his background and areas of expertise. The genius of this approach is that it provides perfect plausible deniability. If a particular piece of information proves false, it can be attributed to a specific sub-agent's error or unreliability. If inconsistencies emerge between different agents' reports, these can be explained through genuine intelligence collection problems. Information is always imperfect. Sources always have blind spots and biases. Moreover, the expansion of the network to 27 agents means that the Germans are essentially drowning in information. The volume is so great that complete analysis is almost impossible. Patterns emerge and disappear. Contradictions are noted, but then superseded by new information. The sheer quantity of material becomes, paradoxically, a form of concealment. Parallel to the letter-based communications, Harris and Pujol eventually establish a radio link. At some point in 1943, a German radio operator makes contact with Pujol by wireless transmission. The Germans have provided Pujol with radio transmission frequencies and codes. A British wireless operator, trained to mimic Pujol's typing patterns and communication style, begins regular radio conversations with the German handler. These radio communications accelerate the flow of information. Now, instead of waiting weeks for letters to be delivered, reports can be transmitted within hours. The Germans can ask clarifying questions and receive answers by return transmission. During the first 6 months of 1944, as the Allies prepare for the invasion of Normandy, Pujol and Harris generate more than 500 separate radio messages, on top of the continuing letter communications. The volume of intelligence flowing from Pujol's network becomes so substantial that German intelligence allocates significant resources solely to the analysis and dissemination of information from this source. Reports attributed to Pujol's agents begin appearing regularly in German strategic assessments. Information supposedly gathered by Pujol's network influences deployment decisions, resource allocations, and strategic planning. By early 1944, German intelligence has invested so heavily in believing in Pujol's network, in acting on its information, and in defending the reliability of its source to higher command, that they have become essentially incapable of recognizing the truth that this entire network exists only in the imagination of one man working with a British intelligence handler. Operation Fortitude. The deception unfolds. Early 1944. Preparing the ground. By early 1944, the broad outlines of the Allied invasion strategy have been determined. The Allies will attempt a massive amphibious assault on Nazi-occupied France, likely in the spring or summer. The invasion will probably involve hundreds of thousands of troops, thousands of ships, and massive quantities of supplies. If the Germans can accurately predict where this invasion will occur and concentrate their forces accordingly, they can potentially repel it or inflict catastrophic losses. Conversely, if the Allies can persuade the Germans to concentrate their forces in the wrong location, the invasion will have a far greater chance of success. Operation Fortitude is the elaborate deception campaign designed to accomplish exactly this. It is a coordinated effort involving military planners, intelligence officers, double agents, physical deception specialists, and psychological warfare experts, all working to convince Nazi Germany that the main Allied invasion will occur in the Pas-de-Calais, an area of northern France much closer to Germany and geographically defensive for the Germans. The physical components of Operation Fortitude are remarkable. In southeastern England, phantom military forces are constructed using inflatable tanks, wooden buildings, and elaborate fake installations. Movie production specialists from Shepperton Studios construct elaborate fake oil storage complexes near Dover. Radio operators broadcast false military communications that the Germans can intercept. Inflatable army camps appear and disappear to suggest massive troop concentrations. But the psychological and intelligence components of Operation Fortitude are equally critical, and here Pujol's network plays a central role. Beginning in early 1944, Pujol starts reporting, through his fictional agents, on the existence of a massive new American military force that has supposedly been assembled in southeastern England. This force is the First United States Army Group, FUSAG. It comprises, according to Pujol's reports, 11 divisions of infantry and armor, all commanded by General George S. Patton, the American general whom the Germans deeply respect and fear. The reports are extraordinarily detailed. Pujol's agents provide information about unit designations, organization, equipment types, estimated troop strengths, command structures, and logistical support. They describe the location of unit encampments, the routes by which supplies are transported, and the apparent logistical preparation for a major military operation. Everything Pujol reports about FUSAG is entirely false. FUSAG does not exist. General Patton is not commanding 11 divisions in southeastern England. There are no massive American army concentrations in the described locations. There are no troop movements along the reported routes. But the German intelligence analysis of Pujol's reports concludes that FUSAG is real, that it represents the main invasion force, and that it is being assembled for an attack on the Pas-de-Calais. The beauty of Pujol's network, from the perspective of the Allies, is that the information comes from multiple independent sources. One of Pujol's agents reports seeing FUSAG troop movements. Another agent, working independently, reports overhearing American officers discussing FUSAG organization. A third agent reports seeing troop train movements consistent with FUSAG assembly. A fourth agent provides logistical information about FUSAG supply movements. To the Germans, these multiple independent confirmations provide powerful evidence of FUSAG's reality. German intelligence analysis of information from multiple independent sources consistently confirming the same facts becomes increasingly credible, not less. The redundancy and internal consistency of the information is, paradoxically, the most powerful tool of deception. By May 1944, German intelligence assessment is that the Allies have assembled a massive force in southeastern England under Patton's command, and that this force is preparing for invasion in the Pas-de-Calais. German command structure adjusts accordingly. Reserve divisions that might otherwise be deployed to Normandy are instead held back, positioned to defend against the supposed invasion in Pas-de-Calais. The trap is set. The countdown to D-Day, May 1944. The final deceptions. As May 1944 progresses, tension increases throughout the British intelligence community and among military planners. The invasion date is being finalized. The massive military machinery is being positioned for the assault. Everything, the success of the operation, the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, the eventual outcome of the entire war, depends critically on German decision-making. And German decision-making, at this crucial moment, depends significantly on the information that Pujol's network is providing. Throughout May, Pujol and Harris continue sending detailed intelligence about FUSAG's supposed preparations. The information is carefully crafted to maintain credibility while maximizing the deception. Some information is accurate but strategically misleading. For example, information about genuine American units that are training in southeastern England, but providing false information about their unit designations or operational plans. Some information is entirely false, but designed to seem entirely plausible. Harris and Pujol also introduce a sophisticated element of misdirection. On several occasions, they have Pujol report, through his fictional network, information that is partially inaccurate or that contains minor errors. These minor inaccuracies are then corrected in subsequent reports. This pattern creates the impression of a real intelligence network reporting genuine information with the inevitable imperfections of actual human intelligence gathering. Meanwhile, Pujol deliberately positions his fictional network to be unable to report certain critical information. For example, Pujol's agents supposedly lack detailed information about the exact date of the invasion. They can report vaguely that an invasion is being planned, but they cannot provide specific timing information. This apparent blind spot is actually consistent with real intelligence collection. Not every source has access to every piece of information. The limitation of information actually enhances credibility. As late May transitions into early June, the tension reaches its apex. The invasion is scheduled for June 5th, But poor weather forces a postponement to June 6. In the early hours of June 6, 1944, as American, British and Canadian forces board landing craft and assault vessels, preparing to cross the English Channel and assault the coast of Normandy, Pujol's network sends final messages to the Germans. The first message confirms that an invasion is occurring, but attributes it to the Fusag force attacking the Pas-de-Calais, not a separate invasion of Normandy. In other words, German military command, based partly on Pujol's intelligence, interprets the Normandy landings as a diversion. The real invasion, according to German intelligence, is still to come in the Pas-de-Calais. Later on June 6th, after the scope of the Normandy invasion becomes apparent even to German command, Pujol sends additional reports. These reports, according to some historical accounts, describe the Normandy invasion not as the main assault, but as a diversionary operation preliminary to the genuine invasion in the Pas-de-Calais. This interpretation will have staggering strategic consequences. German command, believing that Normandy is a diversion and that the main invasion is still to come in Pas-de-Calais, holds back the reserve divisions that might have been deployed to Normandy to contain the landings. These reserve divisions remain positioned to defend against the supposed invasion of Pas-de-Calais. The diversionary operation that never occurs, the invasion of Pas-de-Calais that will never happen, nonetheless draws German military resources away from the actual invasion of Normandy. It is, in many ways, the perfect deception. The Germans are not deceived about whether an invasion is occurring. They can see with their own eyes that the Allies have landed at Normandy. What they are deceived about is the nature and significance of that invasion. They believe it is preliminary, not primary. They believe it is a feint, not the main assault. Aftermath of D-Day, maintaining the deception. June-August 1944. The war continues. The consequences of Pujol's deception are extraordinary. In the days and weeks following the Normandy landings, German command struggles with a fundamental strategic dilemma. Commit the reserve divisions to Normandy to contain the landings, or hold them back in expectation of a main invasion in Pas-de-Calais. In a decision that will have enormous strategic consequences, German high command, influenced in part by Pujol's intelligence reports suggesting that the main invasion is yet to come, chooses to hold back reserves. The Normandy beachhead, under assault from German forces, is therefore relieved of the pressure from German reserve divisions that might otherwise have been deployed there. The Allies gain a critical strategic advantage in the crucial early days when the beachhead is most vulnerable. Over the subsequent weeks and months, as the scale of the Normandy invasion becomes undeniable, German military command gradually shifts resources toward Normandy. But the critical weeks in which Fusag was supposed to invade Pas-de-Calais continue to pass without invasion. German command continues to hold forward divisions in Pas-de-Calais in expectation of an invasion that will never occur. Pujol and Harris maintain this deception through continuing reports. The invasion of Pas-de-Calais is delayed, Pujol reports. Logistics are being reorganized. Forces are being regrouped. The invasion is coming, but not immediately. Throughout June, July, and August 1944, German command maintains significant forces in Pas-de-Calais in expectation of an invasion that exists only in Pujol's imagination. The deception has consequences measured in thousands of lives. The German divisions held in Pas-de-Calais cannot reinforce German forces attempting to contain the Normandy beachhead. The Allies, freed from this additional pressure, consolidate their position and begin breaking out of the beachhead. By early August 1944, the fiction of Fusag has served its purpose so completely that even as German forces in France are being pushed into retreat, German command continues to believe that a massive new invasion is imminent in Pas-de-Calais. It is a triumph of deception strategy. The honor, Germany's recognition of its most valuable asset, July 29, 1944, decorated by the enemy. On July 29, 1944, as the Battle of Normandy continues to rage and German forces attempt to contain the Allied breakout from the beachhead, something extraordinary occurs. German military command, recognizing the exceptional value of the intelligence it believes it has been receiving from Pujol, issues a formal military commendation. Pujol receives the Iron Cross First Class, one of Nazi Germany's highest military decorations, normally awarded only to officers who have demonstrated extraordinary courage and leadership in combat. Think about the extraordinary nature of this moment. Pujol, a Spanish civilian who has never worn a military uniform, who has never fired a shot in combat, who has never engaged in any military operation, receives Nazi Germany's highest military decoration. The Germans are, in effect, honoring Pujol for extraordinary service to the Nazi war effort. They are recognizing him as a hero of Germany, a man who has provided services so valuable, so strategically important, that he merits the highest honors Germany can bestow on a warrior. The irony, of course, is total. Pujol has used his position within German intelligence not to serve Germany, but to deceive Germany. He has provided no genuine intelligence. He has served no German strategic objective. Instead, he has systematically misdirected German resources and influenced German strategic decision-making in ways that have caused Germany to lose battles, lose strategic advantage, and ultimately have contributed to Germany's defeat. Yet German command, so convinced of Pujol's reliability, so dependent on his intelligence network, so committed to the narrative that this network has created, honors him as a hero of the Nazi cause. The decoration arrives via radio transmission, an official military commendation transmitted through German military communications channels, attributing the award to Pujol's extraordinary services to Germany. Pujol, receiving this transmission in London, must experience a remarkable combination of emotions. Triumph that his deception has been so complete, satisfaction that his most fundamental objectives have been achieved, and perhaps a touch of darkly comedic appreciation for the supreme irony that he is receiving Nazi Germany's highest military decoration for having betrayed Nazi Germany so thoroughly. The other side. Britain's recognition, December 1944, honored by both sides. By December 1944, the scope and scale of Pujol's contributions to the Allied victory have become clear to British military and intelligence leadership. The invasion of Normandy has been successful. The breakout from the beachhead has been achieved. German forces have been pushed back across France. The liberation of Western Europe is proceeding. Military and political historians, examining the campaign afterward, will recognize that Pujol's deception operation played a critical role in the success of the Normandy invasion. The German strategy of holding reserves in Pas-de-Calais, a strategy influenced significantly by Pujol's intelligence reports, was a crucial strategic error that benefited the Allies immensely. In recognition of this extraordinary service, the British government awards Pujol the Order of the British Empire, OBE, not the military decoration, but a civilian honor recognizing extraordinary service to Britain. Thus, Juan Pujol García becomes the only person in the history of the Second World War to receive military honors from both sides. The Iron Cross First Class from Nazi Germany, in recognition of his supposed service to the German war effort, and the Order of the British Empire from Great Britain in recognition of his actual service to the British war effort. It is an impossible achievement. It should not be possible. It marks Pujol as unique among the millions who served in the Second World War. Section 13. The End of the War. Liberation and Legacy, 1945-1950. After the victory. As 1945 progresses, Nazi Germany collapses. German cities are bombed into rubble. Soviet forces advance from the east. American and British forces advance from the west. The German military surrenders. Hitler dies. Germany is occupied and divided. The war in Europe ends on May 7, 1945. The war against Japan continues until August 1945. By late 1945, Juan Pujol Garcia's extraordinary wartime service has become part of the intelligence community's internal history. Military and intelligence leaders recognize his contribution, but he remains largely unknown to the general public. The details of his operations remain classified. The true story of his deception network cannot be publicly revealed without compromising ongoing intelligence operations and methodologies. Instead, Pujol finds himself in an unusual position. He has helped save his country from Nazi conquest, but he cannot publicly tell anyone about it. He has received the highest honors from both his enemy and his ally, but these honors cannot be publicly revealed. He has performed acts of extraordinary service, but they must remain secret. Fearing potential revenge from remaining Nazi sympathizers or from the Spanish fascist regime under Franco, Pujol decides to disappear. In 1949, several years after the war has ended, he fakes his own death. He claims to have died from malaria while in Africa. He then rebuilds his life in a completely different location, Venezuela, in South America. Using assumed identities, he begins again. He works as a language teacher for Shell Oil. Later, he opens a gift shop and a bookstore called La Casa del Regalo, the gift house. He lives quietly in Caracas, Venezuela, for decades, keeping his wartime secrets. His wife and family are with him. They live modest, private lives. No one in Venezuela knows that the quiet shop owner is actually one of the most important intelligence agents of the Second World War. The secret of his identity is maintained for nearly 4 decades. Recognition and legacy, 1984-1988. The truth emerges. In the 1980s, as the Second World War recedes into history and the intelligence documents begin to be declassified, the true story of Pujol's deception operation begins to emerge. Historians and intelligence researchers begin uncovering details. Books are published, articles are written. The British government, recognizing that the secrecy surrounding Pujol's operations no longer serves a national security purpose, begins to officially acknowledge his contribution to the war effort. In 1984, Juan Pujol García is finally publicly recognized. He is invited back to Europe. He attends an official ceremony at Buckingham Palace where his wartime service is formally acknowledged and honored. It is a moment of public vindication after nearly 4 decades of secret living. The man who pretended to be dead, who created an entirely fictional identity, who lived quietly in South America, is finally acknowledged as a hero. The public recognition is remarkable. Pujol is hailed as one of the greatest intelligence officers of the Second World War. Military historians recognize his crucial role in the success of Operation Fortitude and the Normandy invasion. Intelligence professionals study his methods and techniques as masterpieces of operational tradecraft. Yet even as public recognition comes, Pujol remains a private man. He is not seeking attention. He has not written a tell-all memoir or sought to capitalize on his fame. He has lived a quiet life and continues to do so. On October 10, 1988, Juan Pujol García Díaz in Caracas, Venezuela, at the age of 76. His death goes largely unnoticed by the general public. He dies as he lived much of his life, privately, quietly, without fanfare. But among those who study intelligence history, study military deception, or study the Second World War, his legacy is immense. He is recognized as possibly the greatest double agent in the history of modern warfare. Epilogue: The Impossible Achievement. A Life Examined. When we consider the life and work of Juan Pujol García, we encounter something extraordinary. A single human being whose actions, intelligence, creativity, and moral conviction directly influenced the outcome of the greatest conflict in human history. Consider the improbability of his achievement. a Spanish civilian with no formal training in espionage, created a fictional intelligence network so sophisticated that it fooled Nazi Germany, an organization with vast resources, dedicated personnel, and centuries of intelligence tradition. Working with one British handler, he composed and transmitted approximately 630,000 words of misinformation, enough to fill 5 or 6 books, all of it internally consistent, plausible, and strategically valuable. He convinced the German High Command to hold reserve forces in the wrong location at the exact moment when those forces were desperately needed elsewhere. He received military honors from both sides of the war. He was motivated not by money, not by ideological affiliation with either side, but by a simple moral conviction that fascism was evil and that he had a duty to oppose it. Most extraordinarily, even after receiving public recognition, even after the truth of his wartime service became known, he maintained a private life, never seeking to capitalize on his fame or exploit his historical significance. The story of Juan Pujol García challenges our understanding of what is possible. It demonstrates that intelligence, creativity, moral courage, and an unwavering commitment to one's principles can accomplish extraordinary things. It shows that sometimes the mightiest victories are won not through military force, but through deception, misdirection, and the power of carefully constructed narratives. His life raises profound questions. What makes a hero? Is it the size of the army someone commands, or is it the quality of the conviction they bring to their work? Is it the weapons they deploy, or is it their ability to manipulate information and perception? Is it public recognition, or is it the private knowledge that one has acted with honor and integrity? Juan Pujol García was only one man, yet his actions influenced the fate of millions. His deceptions changed the course of history. His moral conviction proved more powerful than any military force. That is the ultimate measure of his achievement and the ultimate lesson of his remarkable life.